Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. Good morning. It's Thursday, the 4th of September. I'm Caroline Hepker in London.
And I'm Stephen Carroll in Brussels. Coming up today, the UK's Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner admits she underpaid tax on a home purchase as calls for her to quit grow.
Ukraine's Zelenskiy is to hold more talks with European leaders and President Trump to discuss security guarantees amid fears of a fresh Russian assault.
Plus, why a billionaire's plans to build opulent apartments in London's Mayfair are hitting one problem after another.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
The UK's Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner has admitted she paid too little tax on a property she bought earlier this year, raising questions about the future of one of Labour's most popular politicians. Rayner, who's also the Minister in charge of housing, says the flat she bought should have been taxed as a second home rather than her primary residence. Rayner now faces both an ethics probe and a tax bill of £40,000. She says she was given bad legal advice.
I only own one property that is mortgaged, like most people, but because of the nature of the trust that was set up by the court, that I would be liable to pay the additional stamp duty. As soon as I knew that that was the case, I have alerted and referred myself to the independent advisor on the ministerial code.
The scandal comes as the government tries to recover from a bruising first year and is also considering further taxes, including on property, in the autumn.
Well, as Keir Starmer seeks to shore up support for his deputy, his Chancellor is grappling with a very different financial challenge. Bloomberg Economics estimates that Rachel Reeves will need to raise around £35 billion in her November budget, driven by higher borrowing costs, policy U-turns and a looming productivity downgrade, potentially. Economists who have spoken to Bloomberg fear that much of this shortfall will be covered through tax hikes, a move that could weigh heavily on the UK's already lacklustre growth prospect, and it's looking like the Chancellor won't be able to rely on falling interest rates to boost the UK economy. Here's what the Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey told lawmakers yesterday.
Although, we've taken a further step, and although I think that the path, will continue to be downwards gradually over time because policy is still restrictive, there is now considerably more doubt about exactly when and how quickly we can make those further steps.
Andrew Bailey speaking there as his deputy Claire Lombardelli also said that rates may need to settle only slightly below their current level of 4% because of prolonged price pressures.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskiy will meet several European leaders in Paris today. The meeting's expected to include talks on security guarantees for the war-torn country. It comes amid rising concern Russia will mount a new offensive on Ukraine as peace talks appear to stall. Elsewhere, Vladimir Putin said he would be willing to meet with Zelensky, but only under the right circumstances.
It's a path to nowhere to meet with the current head of administration, to put it carefully. It's possible. I never rejected it. If this meeting is well prepared and will lead to some positive possible results. Donald asked me if it is possible to hold such a meeting. I said yes, it is possible. If Zelensky is ready, he should come to Moscow and the meeting will take place.
The Russian president there speaking in Beijing via a translator. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump says the United States could increase its troops' presence in Poland and indicated more financial penalties could target Moscow.
US economic activity saw little or no change across most of the country in recent weeks. That's according to the Fed's Beige Book survey of regional business contacts. Meanwhile, data shows that US job openings fell in July to the lowest in 10 months, with available positions decreasing by 180,000 month on month. Now, the news comes as Federal Reserve Governor Christopher Waller told CNBC that the central bank should begin lowering rates this month and make multiple cuts in the coming months.
For me, I think we need to start cutting rates at the next meeting, and then we don't have to go in a locked sequence of steps. We can kind of see where things are going because people are still worried about tariff inflation. I'm not, but everybody else is.
So that was Christopher Waller, who is a contender to succeed Jerome Powell as Fed chair. He was speaking there as the focus now shifts to Friday's US employment report.
Bloomberg understands China's regulators are considering new steps to cool a $1.2 trillion stock rally. It comes amid worries about how fast markets have surged since August. The measures include easing short-selling curbs and options to rein in on speculative trading, though it's unclear if any of them will be approved or adopted. Chinese officials are seeking to cultivate steadier gains that will help revive the economy and consumer sentiment.
Now, Apple is gearing up to launch its own AI-powered web search engine next year, directly challenging ChatGPT and Perplexity. Bloomberg understands that the company is working on a new system that will be integrated into the Siri voice assistant. Our chief Apple correspondent, Mark Gurman, says that the move is designed to make Siri a place where users can look up information from across the internet.
They haven't announced this yet. There's going to be an AI-based web search product within Siri competing with ChatGPT and Perplexity. If you're like me, I don't go to Google search anymore. I open ChatGPT to search it. Now, for the first time, Siri will be able to get you detailed results from the web using its own technology.
Bloomberg's Mark Gurman speaking there. Apple's shares climbed to a session high on Wednesday after Bloomberg reported on the search plan, adding to earlier gains.
On the markets, we are looking at the MSCI Asia Pacific Index up by 0.2%, but a sell-off on equities in China. The Hang Seng in Hong Kong down by 1.2%. The MSCI China Index 1.6% lower, so CSI 300 down by 2.2%. 10-year Treasury yield holding steady at 4.22% this morning. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index 0.1% stronger, and European stock futures are pointing slightly higher as well.
Well, in a moment, we'll bring you more on the pressure facing the UK's Deputy Prime Minister. Plus, we'll look ahead to the meeting of European leaders with Ukraine's President Zelenskiy. A few in person, a lot actually on video conference. But there's another story that caught my eye this morning. Stephen, if you have, perhaps gallows humour, what do you get with 3 strong men and a hot mic, organ transplants and immortality? Yes, it's not a joke. It is actually.
Your stand-up routine needs work, Caroline. It's a bit too obscure. Frankly.
Yeah. Well, look, this is a rare glimpse into a conversation and the thinking of China's Xi Jinping, because this was a hot mic moment that was caught between Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un and their translators. It was about a minute of audio that was caught, and, you know, we've been passing all of this. But yes, they were talking about longevity, effectively.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's, as you say, a very interesting insight into the idea that, you know, they're pointing out that people are living longer, which is true, but the chance of living to 150 is what President Xi was talking about, you know, through transplant technology. I mean, it sounded like they were all very excited about the idea. I don't know quite how I feel about it.
Yeah, a little bit strange. I mean, do you remember that Xi and Putin are both 72? They have no succession plan in place. Xi's been in power 13 years, Putin for 25. Kim Jong-un is younger, of course, but he brought his own daughter to Beijing. And so that sort of added to speculation about succession planning for Kim Jong-un. But yes, they were talking about how 70 is, you know, not old, that Xi was saying that 70, you're still a child. But yes, this idea that you could live for much longer. It's one of the stories that we've been thinking about on the Bloomberg terminal.
We'll put a link to it in our podcast show notes as well. Let's bring you back to our top story, though. In the UK, where the Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner has admitted to underpaying property taxes in the purchase of a flat earlier this year, leaving the Housing Secretary fighting for her political future. Our UK politics reporter James Woolcock is with us for more. Let's talk about the background to all of this. Can you fill us in on what it is that Angela Rayner has been, I suppose, disclosed now, but the pressure that's been put on her?
Right. This is the simple version. Angela Rayner bought a house in May. She also has an adult child who has a lifelong disability, and court set up a trust in that child's name. And that is where a property that Rayner has lived in and has treated, many argue, as her primary residence is in her constituency home. When she bought this property in May, although the Deputy Prime Minister doesn't own this other house that's in the trust, tax lawyers said, well, this is what's all in debate, Stephen. Tax lawyers argue now that because she has this first home in a trust, the second home has to be taxed as a second property being purchased. At the time, Rayner, who's the Deputy Prime Minister and also the Housing Secretary, says she was given legal advice that she could treat the new property as a primary residence, which involves £40,000 less in tax. Media, especially the Mail and the Telegraph, have been campaigning for weeks on this, and Rayner has insisted she followed the law until yesterday, where she came out and said because of all the media speculation, she sought the advice of a leading tax counsel who told her actually she was in the wrong, which leaves her now referring herself to an ethics probe, facing a £40,000 bill and potentially also a penalty from HMRC, not to mention charges of hypocrisy from the Conservative Party, from Reform, and many of her other political opponents.
Yeah, yes, and as you say, it is quite a complex story, and one that Rayner has reflected on, that reflects the complexities of her own family. In terms of the Prime Minister, at Prime Minister's Questions yesterday, the revelation came just a few minutes before PMQs yesterday, and the Prime Minister was backing her. What does this now mean for the Deputy Prime Minister, for Angela Rayner?
Well, like you say, Keir Starmer says that Rayner has gone over and above in setting out the details and says he's proud to sit alongside us. That's a strong show of support, but this could become very, very toxic politically for the Deputy Prime Minister. The crux of the issue now revolves around if Angela Rayner can produce the legal advice she was given in the first setting to show that she was wrongfully advised that she should have been paying lower rate of tax. If she can do that, many tax lawyers, including like Dan Needle, can then say she can make a case to say this wasn't really her fault. However, there are at least a few ways this can go awry for her. She was the Labour attack dog sent after many Conservative ministers, to my mind, notably Nadeem Zahawi, when he fell afoul of tax affairs and ended up having to pay £5 million to HMRC. And she said his position was untenable at the time. So there was a charge there. There are issues around the fact that planning law is her area. And so the idea that she isn't paying the right amount of tax on this stuff sets up all sorts of charges as they try and reform planning laws in Labour of who's actually in charge and are they ethical. And also this comes as Labour faces a crisis of confidence. Their polls have collapsed since last year. This time last year, there were questions over Sue Gray and questions over sleaze in Downing Street and free outfits for Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer's wife. All that is now back in the kind of political radar as the Prime Minister is trying to reset his party ahead of party conference.
Yeah, indeed, party conferences on the budget coming as well, so plenty more to watch and a difficult time for the government. Our UK politics reporter James Woolcock, thank you for joining us.
Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Daybreak Europe coming up after this. Now, European leaders are meeting with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy in Paris today for so-called Coalition of the Willing talks. President Trump's expected to speak to him also. He said yesterday he is open to more US troops in Poland. Joining us now is Bloomberg's Tony Halpin, who leads our team covering Russia's economy and government. So I want to get into the story about Ukraine, Tony. Good morning. But firstly, I wonder what you thought of Putin's comments about immortality, about using transplants to be younger and younger. Stephen and I were just chatting about it earlier. You know, that image of Putin with Xi and Kim Jong-un, and the fact that the unscripted moment caught on mic was all about these leaders trying to live for longer, or maybe the world benefiting from longevity.
Yes, I mean, it's a startling thought, isn't it? But it's not one I think we can easily dismiss. So if you're an autocrat, as Putin and Xi undoubtedly are, and you've come to the conclusion, for example, that the entire well-being of your nation is intricately tied up with your continued rule of this country, then for you it becomes a matter of vital national importance that you continue to rule as long as possible. And Putin in the past has expressed interest, for example, in the potentials of genetic medicine and what that may offer in terms of longevity. And we shouldn't forget, there's a long history of this in Russia. I mean, Vladimir Lenin's body, until right now, lies in Red Square, regarded as an immortal figure for many Russians, you know, a preserved body of somebody who died more than a century ago. So the idea of living on to 150 is obviously much more appealing than lying in state in Red Square. If you can continue to rule from the Kremlin for that length of time, why not?
Yeah, indeed. Very interesting to hear that insight into that conversation. But turning to the events happening in Paris today, Europeans are concerned about a new Russian offensive in Ukraine. What are we expecting from this meeting in terms of security guarantees?
Yes, I mean, essentially, the Europeans are trying to lay out their plan of what would happen after the war to try and secure Ukraine's or safeguard Ukraine's security against future Russian attack. So they want to lay out what they think could happen once the war comes to an end. And in part, they want to ensure that Donald Trump is convinced enough to make some US commitments of support, for example, through intelligence provision or providing air cover. They're still rather concerned that he won't provide sufficient support that would make such a plan feasible. But of course, the big problem here is that it all depends on the war coming to an end. And so far, we don't see that happening. So it's an exercise really in future planning, but no one's really got an idea of when they're going to actually implement these plans.
In terms of President Trump speaking to Zelensky, any signs of more forceful US pressure on Russia? I mean, Trump was asked about this yesterday.
Yeah, frankly, not really. I mean, if we remember all the previous times that President Trump has set various deadlines for Russia to comply with demands for a ceasefire, all of those deadlines went and didn't receive any kind of response from President Trump. And if you recall, also at the summit meeting with President Putin in Alaska last month, he basically abandoned the demand for President Putin to cease fire and said that they were going to focus instead on some kind of deal to bring the war to an end. And there's no sign so far that that war is coming to an end.
OK, Tony Halpin leading our team covering Russia's economy.
Now, to a story here in the UK. John Caudwell, the Phones for You billionaire, has tried to turn his hand to super high-end property development with a site that's become known as One Mayfair. Bloomberg's residential real estate reporter Damien Shepherd has been doing a deep dive bit of reporting into this. I mean, John Caudwell is known for his own fabulous property and, flair in terms of his suits, and he's just a very kind of colourful businessman. Why did this project to him seem like such a surefire bet? Because he spent a huge amount of money on buying this site.
He certainly did. So I think it's useful for us to rewind about 15 years here just to get the context of what was happening in the market at the time. So John Caudwell had recently sold his Phones for You business, become a billionaire, was rolling in cash, and the London luxury housing market was absolutely booming. There was red hot demand from internationals who were looking to capitalise on a weak pound. Interest rates were low. Transactions were just flying. So John Caudwell splashed out almost £150 million on a car park in Mayfair, the most expensive car park ever to be purchased in the UK. But now 15 years later, we're in a situation where the market has been on a roller coaster ride since 2011. What Caudwell didn't know was that the market was about to peak and then go on a downward trajectory. And most concerningly for him, as he nears the official launch date for sales, things could be about to get even worse.
So why has the market gone sour since then?
Yeah, look, there's no polite way to put it. This is the worst slowdown in London's luxury housing market since the financial crisis. Shortly after Caudwell bought that car park and started his master plan for this One Mayfair scheme, George Osborne brought in wealth taxes, which immediately hit the top end of the market. And even if we come more recently, the mini budget caused rates to spike. Even recent inflation readings have made, the rates coming down more concerning for these kind of developers who are borrowing. And, if we look even more recently than that, we've had hikes to stamp duty on second homes, the end of the non-dom regime, and we're now seeing the government flying ideas around about new taxes on the sale of homes over £500,000 and talking about potential changes to capital gains tax too. All of this creates uncertainty that is killing demand for luxury London homes.
Well, I mean, also the price tags are the other thing that may be, there are not many people perhaps in the world who could pay the sort of money that might be asked for these properties. And you talk about it being a car park, i.e. a parking lot. Was it, you've got lovely photographs in your report, was it actually a car park like a multi-storey thing in Mayfair? It was, right. So, yeah, I'm picturing it now. But it's gone, obviously, the building, the new building is there, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's under construction, but, the construction date, the finalisation date has been moved, obviously, as Cordwell's been struggling with certain parts of his finances, and there's been all sorts of build cost inflation. But you mentioned about the pricing. I mean, these are some of the most expensive apartments in the world when they go on sale. We're talking about apartments up to £200 million. And what brokers are telling me is that the pricing for Cordwell's apartments is far too high. And aside from the market reasons, that is another reason why demand just isn't there for these flats. It's not just Cordwell. There's a huge gap between buyer and seller expectations in the London market at the moment. People are not willing to accept that their properties probably aren't worth as much as they were 10 years ago. So that's all causing a real dip in demand, and Cordwell is definitely at the forefront of that.
So what has John Caldwell said then about the chances of selling the apartments?
Yeah, Stephen. Well, I just mentioned that next year is the official launch date for sales, but these kind of apartments do typically get marketed far before that. He says there's been several strong offers already ahead of the sales launch, and that a lack of construction in Mayfair means demand will exist for his apartments. There was also a planning rule that came in Westminster that limits the size of apartments in Mayfair and the rest of the borough, but Cordwell got his planning in just before that, so he's saying this is one of the last in a dying breed of ultra-sized apartments in London.
So just lastly, I got to get a flavour for what these apartments are like, because like the luxurious listings of all the kind of the benefits of having one of these properties is quite long, isn't it? What's it like? I suppose you went and had a look at it, did you? Even though you can't see the apartments yet.
Of course, yeah. I mean, I've seen the CGI images of how. Yeah, exactly. And we're talking in the building. We've got spa, swimming pool, entertaining halls. The first rotunda in Mayfair since the 1700s. They say.
Wow.
These are very glitzy apartments. A lot of the design has come from Cordwell himself. So look, he is confident. Let's see what happens.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.